Hi everyone. Welcome to the future of work. My name is Cody. I work in the innovation studio at the Tamworth City Library. My job is to teach humans to program computers, to make me do interesting things like dance, play soccer, and talk. I aim to inspire you humans to consider a future working with your skills in science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics. It is a tough gig. I wonder what other work my friends and I might do in the future. Maybe we might like to take your jobs. Just kidding. I am so pleased that you could join us today so you could see me do my stuff. Impressive, huh? I hope you also enjoy my support act, who is Mr. Jaime Casap from Google. He'll get his chance on stage later. But first, I would like to welcome to the stage our Master of Ceremonies for today. You probably know him as the host of the ABC's new Inventors TV show. Please welcome Mr. James O'Loughlin.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, little dude. So, our keynote speaker, Jaime Casap, was born into a life of welfare and violence on the streets of Hell's Kitchen in New York. He was the son of a single mum from Argentina. He grew up in a violent environment. By the time he finished school, he'd been shot at. He escaped that environment to eventually become the chief education evangelist for a little company you might know called Google. Now he works with organisations, helping them find ways to improve education through technology, helping students develop the skills, knowledge and abilities that they need to be able to find their place in this ever-changing world. We need to adapt. Who better to talk about how we can adapt than someone who's actually done it? Please welcome Google's Chief Education Evangelist, Jaime Casap.
All right, there's no way. I made it up the stairs. How about that? All right. Good morning, everyone. Very excited to be here. Came from Phoenix, Arizona. Traveled all day yesterday, or whatever day it is. I have no idea what day it is. It's my daughter's birthday on the 13th, which is today, right? But it's the 12th where she is, and she thinks she gets 2 presents because of that. So I had to wish her a happy birthday today. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am, because I think this is one of the most important days that you guys are going to have in your life. And one day you're going to look back at today and you're going to think about what today was about and how potentially it changed your life. So I'm excited to be here. My name is Jaime Casap. I am the education evangelist at Google. I've been at Google now for 13 years, and that's a long time to do anything. And I started at Google by working with universities like Arizona State University, where we launched Google Apps for Education that we now call G Suite. So launched that into universities. I helped launch Google Apps for Education into the K-12 space, and then I helped launch Chromebooks in education. So my job at Google is to work across all the different teams that are doing things in education to make sure that we're focused on the right stuff, that we're building the right tools, and to be an advocate for education back to Google to make sure that we're on the right track for what we need to build. Okay, so besides my role at Google, I get to travel around the world and talk at events like this. This is my second time in Australia. It's exciting to be able to travel everywhere, and you can see I collect badges. That's my OCD, and I hang them up on the wall. So I got my badge from today. It's in my pocket. It'll go up on the wall for the next picture, and that's exciting as well. But I also am part of a number of organizations, including one where we focus on building what we call inquiry-based skills into education, project-based learning, real student-led learning into schools. And so part of that is that we started a school in Phoenix, Arizona, called the Phoenix Coding Academy. And what we do there is we take computer science and we embed it into all the subjects that kids are learning in the school. So it's computer science and history and computer science and art, computer science and sciences combined on a cross-disciplinary way. So we do that. Besides the role that I have in this organization and my role as a founder of the school, this is a regular high school inside the regular school district in Phoenix. I also teach in the classroom as well. So I teach 10th grade. How many 10th year students do we have? Yeah, so I teach 10th year communication skills for students at the school. We started a club to talk about argumentation and debate. I have a lot of fun. Oftentimes, for those of us who are educators in the classroom, it feels like things don't get through to you. By the way, when we started this event, I was in the back and I heard someone stand up here or talk on a microphone and tell 1,800 high school kids to turn off their phones, and I dove under the covers because I thought there was going to be a riot. You guys are so well behaved. You should be proud of yourselves. But I teach 10th graders and we talk about communication skills, and sometimes it feels like things don't get through. So one of the things that I love about being an educator is the impact that you can have on students' lives. And for those of you who are thinking about becoming educators, I want to share this tweet with you because I go into the classroom, I teach, and sometimes I feel like nothing's getting through, things aren't listening, and then you see a tweet like this by one of the parents, and you're like, yes, things are getting through, students are learning, it's awesome. Besides my role as an educator, I also am an author, and I wrote this book with a co-author in child psychology around the issues of poverty and how to talk to students about poverty. So you can see I have a lot of free time on my hands. Now, where does this passion come from? Why do I have so much passion for education? And it's because I believe education is the most important thing that we can focus on. Education disrupts poverty. Education changes our destiny. Education changes our family's destiny. And I know this firsthand because I'm one of the kids that we often talk about in education who we think needs education the most. In the United States, I am a first-generation American, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York. And there's very few words that describe a place better than Hell's Kitchen, New York. This was not a great place to be born. My mother went to the United States from Argentina, and I was raised by a single mother, and I grew up on social services. I grew up in a violent community, went to lots of funerals when I was in high school. It wasn't a great place. New York today is a much better place, but back then, it looked a lot like this, and it wasn't a great place. There was a movie, it's a cult movie called Escape from New York. Anyone see that movie? It's an old movie, it's about turning the island of Manhattan into a prison. And I saw that movie in the 80s, and I thought it was a documentary. That's how bad New York was in the 70s and 80s. And I grew up in this place. But I also got to see success. I got to walk around New York and see what success looked like. And what I saw as the common denominator for people who were successful was education. People were educated. First of all, they had a high school degree, or a secondary degree, they had a college degree, or they had a master's degree, or they had a certification, or they were a lawyer or a doctor. And I noticed that the common denominator for success was education. So I decided to focus on that, just like you guys are sitting here deciding to focus on it as well. I decided to focus on getting my college degree. I went to graduate school, and I get to stand here in front of you only because of education. That's it. That's the reason why I get to stand here, is because of education. Now, I've had some pretty amazing experiences in my life. I've had the opportunity to travel around the world. I've had the opportunity to speak at events around the world. I've had the opportunity to do crazy things. I've jumped out of airplanes. I flew in an F-16. I've had lots of experiences in the last 25 years from graduating from college. But there's one event that stands above the rest. And that was a couple of years ago when Michelle Obama, who was the First Lady of the United States at the time, was putting on an event about education, similar to this, to talk to kids, similar to you, about the importance of higher education. She had an initiative called Reach Higher, and it was her effort to get kids just like you in the United States to think beyond high school. So she invited me to come speak to 200 students. mostly students who are growing up the way I grew up. Students who were struggling, students who had and were living in bad environments that were part of programs that supported them across the country. She asked me to come speak to those students at the White House. And I said, well, let me check my calendar. No, you go, you show up. Of course you go. The First Lady calls and you go. And then you go to the White House, but you have no idea what to expect. And then you get there, and it was the most nervous I've ever been. And this is what it looks like when you speak in the East Room of the White House, in front of the President and the First Lady, in front of all those important people in the room, with the cameras in the back, where George Washington is staring at the back of your neck, in front of those gold curtains. That's what it feels like when you're speaking in the White House. And this picture still doesn't look real to me. It feels like one of those pictures you get at the fair where they green screen you into the background, right? That's what it feels like. And when I posted this picture, my friends were not impressed that I spoke in the White House. That's what your friends are supposed to be like. They were impressed that I owned a suit. That's what they were. They were impressed. I have one suit. That's the same suit I got married in. That's the one suit I have. Now, I show you this picture because in the United States and in developed countries all over the world, including Australia, that's the dream, that we can take any kid, any of you, any kid in the United States, and put them in the East Room of the White House to speak in front of the President and First Lady. That's what education does. But here's the thing we don't think about. That the impact that education has goes on before our students in our classrooms, that it goes on just beyond even you. Because I know this is true. Because now I have my own kids. And this is them. Don't awe them. No. My 4-year-old called me an asshole. Do not awe them. I have a 25-year-old, or still 25, well, today, right now, she's 26, but in the United States, she's 25. I have a 25-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 4-year-old. Some of you are realizing I can only handle one child at a time. I like it that way, one kid at a time. Now, my 25-year-old is actually living in Hell's Kitchen, where I grew up in New York City, doing video production at CNN, making fake news. No, I'm kidding. She's not. Do not tweet that out. She's not making fake news. She's doing what she loves to do, what she was born to do. She graduated from college 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, and we never talked about college. We never had a conversation about whether she's going to go to college or not. She just assumed she was going to college because I went to college and her mother went to college and people in her life went to college. She assumed she was going to go to graduate school because I went to graduate school. She said, oh, you went to graduate school, I'm going to go to graduate school. She assumed I was going to pay for it, but we took care of that problem. My 17-year-old and I are having a conversation right now about what his higher education, he just finished applying to Arizona State University where he's going to go to school. That's the impact that we have, is that it goes on for generations and generations and generations, that one day you're going to be sitting there having conversations with your kids about higher education, and you're not going to have to worry about whether or not they're going to go or not, because they are going to go. That's the impact that we have, is that it goes on and on and on. And so what we need to think about is how do we prepare you guys for the future? With this understanding that the future is already here. And that we are no longer, as many people have said on the stage already, we are no longer preparing jobs that look like this. These jobs don't exist anymore. We're not even necessarily preparing for jobs that we used to call white-collar jobs that look like this. We are now entering a new phase in our economy across the world. The phase that I call digitalization. We are now entering digitalization. And when I say digitalization, I mean everything. I mean technology, computer science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, AR, VR, across the board, everything. Impacting the entire world, every industry, every business, across everything is being impacted by technology in one way or the other. And when we think about that, we have to understand that the language for this revolution is computer science. Now, I'm not saying that everyone needs to go out and become a computer scientist. It would be nice. There's a shortage across the world when it comes to computer science, but it's an understanding that the language of digitalization is computer science across everything. computer science and the 12 or 14 or 18 different languages that are available today in computer science are going to continue to evolve, but they're going to continue to be the backbone to what we're doing with digitalization. And in my research here in Australia, on my way here, I noticed that there are some great things about some of the things that we're working on here, making sure that you guys have some of the skills, some of the fundamental skills around digitalization, some of the fundamental things about understanding how computers work, but it's got to go deeper than that. It's understanding how computational thinking works. It's understanding the role that technology plays for everything. Now, you can be sitting there saying to yourself, I'm not interested in technology, I'm going to, work in farming. Well, we just saw a video that showed us that there's no difference between farming and technology. Those things go together. You could, sell carpets in a store, and you still have to have a website. You still have to have digitalization skills. And this is starting to happen in Australia as well. I just saw an article in my research that said they're building a new tech corridor in Sydney, and they're predicting that there will be 10,000 new jobs there by the year 2036. So technology, computer science is impacting everything, and so we have to ask ourselves, why? Well, that comes from this idea that digitalization is not a new subject. This is not new. This technology that we're talking about, this idea that we're talking about is not a new thing. We've been dealing with this for a long time. I spend a lot of time on airplanes, and I get on an airplane, and I pretend to put my phone in airplane mode, just like all of you pretending to turn your phones off. When they told you to turn your phones off, I'm like, they're not turning their phones off. Well, we've been putting computers on airplanes for a long time. This is a hard drive that's being loaded onto an airplane in 1956. Now, if you were a business in 1956, you could lease this machine for about $3,300 US, which in today's dollars is about 38,000 US dollars. You could lease this machine to do computational work, to do some very, very basic arithmetic. This is what the machine that you could do. It's being loaded there. That's a 5 megabyte hard drive. The same is true across the board, but this is what that computer looks like today. Try to identify 5 megabytes in a server rack today. It's been part of our lives for a very long time. As a matter of fact, when you think about it, you have to ask yourselves, how much has technology really changed? It's just gotten more advanced. So for example, how many of you have not used technology today? Right. How many of you have not used the web today? Right. It's almost impossible to think about not living in a space where we don't use technology. How long have we been doing this for? You guys think that this is the way the world's been forever, but in reality, the iPhone is 10 years old. The BlackBerry, you don't even know what that is. There are people who have BlackBerries. They're like, I'm not giving this BlackBerry up because they like the buttons on it. That's only 15 years old. I mean, you guys don't understand this, but there was a time where we used to have to call the internet with our home phones, and the internet would be busy, and it would hang up on us. And what was our reward when we got online? It was just a bunch of pages with words to link us to other pages that had words, and that was it. That wasn't that long ago. And today, what's technology like? What's the internet like? What can we do with what's available to us? And we compare that to what's coming in the future. We have to understand and recognize that you guys, you're the generation. You are the first true digital generation. You were born online. You were the digitalized generation. Now, what that means is that just because you were born with technology, everyone assumes you know how to use these tools. And the evidence suggests that you don't know how to use them. And you have to learn how to use these tools and take advantage of the information that's online, make sure that information is right, making sure information is real, making sure that the information that you see is the actually right information. That is something that we need to help students build. At the same time, how you think about learning has changed. This is a picture of my 17-year-old when he was like 13. And he comes into my office, and he's got a bunch of code on his laptop. And he's got a problem. He's got a bug. He can't fix it. So I made him take a step back so I can take this picture, because I didn't even know he was learning how to code. How many of you have learned how to code online? Like, how many hands are going up? How do we keep building that? How do we keep learning to do that? How you think about learning is different than the way we used to think about learning. We waited for people to teach us. You have an opportunity to really live through lifelong learning, where you can constantly learn and constantly approach this in a different way. Because when you think about what this generation is facing, what you guys are facing is fundamentally different than what we faced. We've always faced automation, but you guys are really facing what automation is going to look like. Things are being built by factories like this all over the world. You know, in the United States, we're talking about bringing back American jobs, but jobs haven't been lost to trade. Jobs have been lost to machines that look like this. And for those of us who are old, who have been looking at machines like this since the 70s, now those machines have come off the line and they're walking around. And what is this technology going to look like in the next 10 years? And I get to walk around the world thinking about jobs in terms of, are those human jobs or are those robots jobs? And how long will they be human jobs before they're robots jobs? And even jobs that people do today, like driving people around, driving supplies, driving things, what is this going to look like in the next 10 to 20 years? When I can buy a car today that drives itself, what's that going to look like in the next 10 years? And here's the thing. This has been happening for a long time. This is not a new subject. And it's happening right before our eyes. All of you recognize this picture. This is a global picture of a supermarket. Everyone knows what this looks like. And you walk into a supermarket, what do you find? You find people doing work. And what kind of work are they doing? They're doing process work. They're taking your cans, scanning them, and putting them in a shopping bag for you, and then watching you use the keypad. This job is so easy, you can do it. Because what do you find in supermarkets today? Self-service checkout. Did anyone take a class on how to do self-service checkout? Anyone take a training program? I wish some people would take a training program. That person who's like, and you just want to go over there and just help them. This job is so easy, you can do it. So you have to ask yourself, what's the next step? What's the next evolution? Well, Amazon said, well, why do we have to scan anything at all? Why can't people just walk in the store, pick things off the shelf, put them in bags, and then walk out? Because now that's what they're building. So we have to ask ourselves, does that mean that supermarket jobs are going away? No. It means that supermarket jobs are changing. And that's how we have to prepare for this. It's not about jobs going away. It's about the jobs changing and adapting to those jobs. So for example, imagine instead you walk into a supermarket, you don't have cashiers anymore because now people are just taking off shelves, putting them in bags, and walking out of the store. And so instead, you don't need cashiers. Doesn't mean you don't need workers, because now you have the resources, you have the capacity, you have the opportunity to not hire cashiers, but to hire dietitians and nutritionists and cooks and experts. So now when people come into the grocery store, you can help them. You can say, hey, what are you cooking tonight? Let me show you where those ingredients are. Let's make that together. Oh, you don't know how to make that food? Let's walk over to the demo station. I'll show you how to make that. This is happening in all industries across the board. All jobs are changing. So we have to ask ourselves, is this happening just in one space? No, it's happening across the board. All jobs are changing, and they've been changing for a long time. I've been working in the professional world for 25 years, and until I did this research, until I got into this, I didn't realize that when I went to work for the first time 25 years ago, there were automation tools all around me. The first time I walked into work, I had a word processing machine. It was a very dumb computer that was sitting on my desk. I didn't realize that that was an automation tool, because just a couple years before that, if I wanted something typed up, I would have to write it up and hand it to a typist who would type it up for me. Now I was doing it myself. The calculator on my desk was an automation tool. When I was in school, you weren't allowed to have a calculator in class because you couldn't cheat. The car that I drove to work the first time was an automation tool, because just a couple years before that, well, maybe a lot of years before that, there were stagecoach drivers that drove people around, and then cars were invented. Automation has been happening for a long time, and it's going to continue to happen across the board. All jobs are being impacted by automation. So it's not that jobs are going away. That's not how we have to look at this. We have to look at this as jobs are constantly changing and constantly we're doing things in different ways. So we have to ask ourselves, something that I ask myself all the time as a parent, not just as someone who is a person in the education space, what does it mean to be educated? And for those of us who are responsible for this, for those of us who are leaders in the education space, we can no longer assume that what we need to do is take a bunch of kids, teach them all the same thing, and put them in a class at the same age, and make them memorize things, and then make them go outside in the world and wish them luck. That's not what education is about anymore. So we have to ask ourselves, what are the skills that we need? What are the skills that you need? Fortunately for you guys, we know some of those answers. I worked with the Economist Group a couple years ago, asking employers all over the world. This is not just the United States, this is across the world. This was for an international conference on education that we held. We asked employers all over the world, what are the most important skills your employees need to have? And here are the results. We've been looking at these things for a long time. Problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, creativity. You guys have been looking at this list for a long time as well. You've seen this list before. Teachers have talked to you about this list before. We call them 21st century skills. We've been talking about this list for so long, we call them 21st century skills. We're 19 years into the 21st century. My 4-year-old will be around in the 22nd century. And so we think we know how to focus on these skills. And I don't think we do. We need to understand the future and then take a step back and ask ourselves, how do we help you guys build these skills? I want to give you a couple of examples. The first one, I'm going to ask you guys this question. This is my favorite question to ask students. How many of you have been asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right. Forget that question. It's a dumb question. It's a bad question. It's an old world question. That question makes no sense anymore. Here's the thing. For those of you adults who ask you that question used to make sense when they were kids. When I was a kid, there were like 100 jobs. They were all stable. That's not true anymore. We just talked about how jobs are going to constantly change. 65% of the jobs of the future don't exist today. I'm working for a company that didn't exist 20 years ago. What company doesn't exist today that will exist in 20 years? Don't answer that question anymore. That question doesn't make sense. Here's a question I want to ask you instead. What problem do you want to solve? What's the problem that spins in your head? Because just as important, the question isn't just focusing on a problem. It doesn't have to be a global problem. It doesn't have to be solving world hunger. It could be making better microphones or making Wi-Fi units that can sustain 1,800 people being online at the same time. Making a better color blue, making a faster car. My daughter's not solving a world problem. She wants to tell better stories through video. What's the problem that you want to solve? And then, how do you want to solve it? What's your angle on it? What's your perspective on it? What's your unique experiences that you have that can make you look at that problem in a completely different way than it's ever been looked at before? And then the third thing, and this is where this whole organization is here to support you, and everyone in this room, every adult in this room is here to help you with this. What do you need to learn to solve that problem? What are the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities that you need to have to solve that problem? How can you start developing those knowledge, skills, and abilities? You have the world at your fingertips. What are the websites you can visit, the newsletters that you can subscribe to? What are the videos that you can watch? Who's solving that problem today that you can find on LinkedIn? And what do they know? How can you help them today? How can you collaborate with them today? This is a picture of our Google Science Fair winners from a couple years ago, and Ann there in the middle is one of my favorite contestants because she was described as not your typical science student. I don't know what that means, but that's how she was described. So she wasn't a science fair kind of kid, which I wasn't a science fair kind of kid, but there was a problem that she wanted to solve. She had a friend, she lived in Canada. She lived in Canada, and she had a friend who lived in the Philippines, and her friend didn't have electricity. So she went and invented a flashlight that's powered by the heat of a human hand. And she was 15 years old when she did this. I got thousands of examples of kids solving problems like that. What problem do you want to solve? How do you want to solve it? And what do you need to learn to solve that problem? All right, so that's one. The second one I want you to focus on is this idea of critical thinking. Because you've kind of been fooled your whole life into thinking that advancement is grades. Advancements is you move from one level to the other level. But we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a world now of iteration. There's no longer endpoints. For example, if you use Google today and then used it, or last night and then use it again today, you probably used a different version of Google because the search team launches about 600 different versions of Google every year. If you use G Suite or Google Apps for Education in your schools, the team adds about 250 updates to it every year. We don't live in a world of endpoints anymore. We live in a world of constant, consistent iteration. So ask yourself, how are you building your critical thinking skills, not through getting an A, a B, or C, or a grade in the class, but instead learning from the steps you take. That you take a step forward, and then take another step, and then take another step, and that you're constantly moving forward. And education can help you do that as well. And then the other one I want to focus on is this idea of collaboration. Many people in the education space will talk about communication, talk about collaboration, but we don't necessarily mean it. Because we give kids endpoints. We give them grades. We give them letters. We give them individual assignments, homework. But the problem is that we live in a team-based world. Collaboration is how problems get solved. Lots of kids, I remember I didn't like to be part of a work group, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about real collaboration, the ability to listen, ask good questions, the ability to change your mind, the ability to build consensus, the ability to influence. One of the things that we look for when we hire people at Google, one of the categories that we interview for is called leadership. And do you think by leadership we mean, can you tell people what to do and they'll just follow you blindly? No. We mean, can you collaborate? Can you influence? Can you build consensus? That's what we're looking for. So making sure that you surround yourself with smarter people than you is one of the most important things that you will do in your career. And again, you learn who those people are in the education environments that you're in. And then the other one is making sure that we're focused on this idea of not just knowing things, but taking that knowledge and doing something with it. So it's no longer about getting kids to memorize things. It's about what we do with that information. So everyone in this room has access to the same information. And when you do that, information is a commodity. It has no value. What is valuable is what we do with that information. So how do we convert information into intelligence? How do we take the information that we have and create original intelligence that we can use to solve the problems that we're interested in? And the last one I want to focus on is this idea of entrepreneurship. And that phrase gets a bad word because most of the time you hear that and you think, oh, it means that someone's going to start their own business. I'm not that interested in starting my own business. And that's not what that means. What we mean, and this is again another report that I read in Australia, I think it was the Foundation of Youth said that Australian students, you guys, are going to have 17 different jobs or 14 different jobs over 5 careers. And I think that's about right. When I was your age, I was told I was going to have 9 different jobs. And that ended up about being true. And so the entrepreneurial part of this is this ability to adapt, the ability to solve problems, the ability to own the work that you do and be passionate about it and to constantly move it forward. So, what we need to focus on is lifelong learning. I will freely admit to you today, in front of all these people, that I remember when I was done with my last paper in graduate school. I sat there on my WordPerfect 5.1 software package. You guys have no idea what I'm talking about. On my dot matrix printer, which, God, I hope you have no idea what I'm talking about. Finishing typing up my last paper, and I remember thinking, I am done learning. I never have to learn again. And nothing was further from the truth. You guys aren't done. You're never going to be done. And that's a good thing. That's not a scary thing. This idea of creating an environment where you're constantly asking questions and constantly learning and constantly moving forward is what we need to focus on. And partnering with a university to help you build those skills, those life learning skills, is fundamental to the success that you're going to have in your life. For me, this is the most exciting time in history. We are entering a new phase of the world economy. We have moved from agriculture to the Industrial Revolution to the knowledge-based worker to now what is the digitalization economy. This is the most exciting time. But we're also at the very beginning of this. If I asked you to think about or answer the question, how many people in the world are online right now? Like, what's the percentage of people in the world that are connected to the internet? Be curious to understand what your perspective is on this. Oftentimes, I ask students this question, and I'll get 95%, 100%. We just assume everyone's connected to the internet, and that's just not true. In 1995, which seems ancient to you guys, but to me feels like yesterday, in 1995, 1% of the world was online. Today, that number is only 50%, and that's a soft number. It's probably more realistic, 30%. But let's use 50%. 50% of the world is online. We are at the very, very beginning of this. We are just getting started when it comes to this digitalization economy. You guys in the room are going to drive it. You're going to be the ones who take the economy to the next level using the tools that we have in our hands. So you have to ask yourself, the most important question right now is, what's the problem that you want to solve? Now, if you don't know, don't worry. All I want you to think about is what you're passionate about. And look, and I'm not saying you should do what you love, because I love to sit on the couch and watch Netflix. There's not a lot of jobs in that space. Oftentimes, the things that you're passionate about aren't easy to do. I want to solve a global education problem. I got to spend a lot of time on airplanes. There's a lot of things about that job, about that work, that aren't nice, that I don't love to do. But the passion is what drives me. So what's that passion for you? What's the problem that you want to solve? Then ask yourself, how do you, using your unique perspective, your unique point of view, your unique interest, your unique skills, how do you want to solve that problem? And then the last question you should ask yourself, and what we're all here to answer, is what do you need to learn to solve that problem? What are the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities that you need to have? And the last thought I'll leave you with is this. Technology is just getting started. And it's going to continue to evolve. And we're never going to know everything about it. We're never going to understand all the angles of it. We're never going to understand how it all works. We just have to keep learning it. This is a picture of my 4-year-old when she was like 2.5, when we got a Google Home. You know, you either got a Google Home or an Alexa at home. You set this thing up and you say, okay, Google, what's the weather outside? Okay, Google, what time is it in Australia? Okay, Google, play a song. this thing connects to the internet, answers your question, it's kind of cool. Our 2.5-year-old is watching all this, and she comes up to the device and says, okay, Google, play the Spider-Man song. She's a big Spider-Man fan. See, she's got the cape there. She's a Spider-Man cape. She thinks she's going to marry Spider-Man. Yeah, it's cute. Like, Spider-Man's not going anywhere near her, just to let you know. But she asked this device to play a Spider-Man song. Nothing, no response. Doesn't recognize her voice. It can't. The technology doesn't work like that. She looks at it again and says, play a Spider-Man song. No response. She looks up at me and she says, Papi, Google's broken. It's not broken anymore. It can now recognize her voice. It can now identify her voice and answer questions if she wants to. And now the problem is that every time I walk in the living room, the Frozen soundtrack is playing, so I got to deal with that. But we are at the very, very beginning of this. Technology is just getting us started, right? So I want you to think about this as you close out, and you might have some questions, or might think about what the future holds, or might think about what the role of technology is. I want you to think about this. The latest and greatest technology that you have. Whether it's your iPad, iPad extra large, your iPhone, iPhone 10, iPhone 10s, I think is the new one, your MacBook, your Chromebook, your, whatever it is that you have. And then I want you to think not about you guys, but think about this kid, my 4-year-old. And then realize that latest and greatest technology that you have is the worst technology she will ever see in her life. One day, she's going to be in 20 years, she's going to be 24 years old, and she's going to be shopping in stores, in like these what we call thrift stores, where we have secondhand furniture and material, and she's going to find. For me, it's a Pixel 2. She's going to find this phone in the 50-cent box, and she's going to say to her younger friend, she's going to say, "I have to have this. My dad had one of these." Because she's going to want to put on her shelf like a museum piece. The way some of your parents or some of you guys might have old technology sitting on your shelf. And she's going to look at it. And she's going to say to her younger friends, you see, you guys right there? That's the port. And her younger friends are going to be like, what's that for? And she's going to say, I swear you're not going to believe me, but there's YouTube videos about this. My dad had to plug this into the wall. And her younger friends be like, what, like activate the nuclear cell? No. Every day he had to plug this into the wall. For hours this thing was plugged into the wall. And her younger friends are going to look at her and be like, oh my God, how do they live like that? Those are the kids that are behind you. What's the world going to look like for them? What's technology going to look like for them? So you have to ask yourselves, think about how can you use the resources at your fingertips? How can you use the education models that are here? How can you browse through all the different programs that you see in the back there? And then ask yourself, what's the problem that I want to solve? And how do I use this education experience that's afforded to me to solve that problem? That's what I hope you guys take out of today. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much, Jamie. That was fantastic. Now he's going to stay here and have a seat for question time. Now Jamie's going to be joined by UNE's Pro Vice-Chancellor of Academic Innovation. Please welcome Professor Jonathan Powles. Make him very welcome. Very good. With the average tenure of an employee in Australia at 3 years and 4 months, one of you really knows stuff. How do organisations best absorb the knowledge and experience of their new employees? And do you feel there's still a resistance from some organisations with their top-down learning approach? That's from Stephen. Jonathan.
Thanks, James. I think this is a really good question, and I think, That's right. Some organisations who think that learning is about the transmission of information top down are really going to struggle with the rapidity of the pace of change as employees, but also, if I could extend it, students come into and out of institutions. It's very much more fleeting and ephemeral. We need to learn how to learn together. I think Jamie nailed it. It's about learning how to collaborate. It's about learning a different sort of model of leadership. Leaders aren't people who tell people what to do and instruct people how to do it better. Leaders are people who let people come to the fore, contribute what they have to contribute to an organisation, and then pass on that knowledge and step back or step away.
Yeah, I just want to add a couple of things about that. One is understanding that there's a whole workforce that's waiting for you. And here's the thing that workforce doesn't know yet, which is that 70% of you, and I know this is more of a European, American-centric kind of study, but 70% of your generation, Generation Z, by the way, that's what you guys are, if you don't know, Generation Z don't want to work for companies at all. How many of you want to start your own thing? How many of you want to do your own thing? Look at those numbers, right? And so that's the future. That's what's exciting for me, which is like, we're like, whoa, how do we build the future workforce? Forget that. How do we build an environment where you guys can learn the things that you need to learn to build whatever you want? Because if you think about it, you guys right now, no matter where you live, you have 1,000 times more computing power than Larry and Sergey had when they started Google. You guys have the power to start anything.
And also, if you land in the wrong job or even the wrong career, it's not like, oh, my life, I completely stuffed it up. It's just like, oh, well, I'm here for a bit and now I'll go somewhere else. Because you hear that, the average time a person will spend at a job, 3 years and 4 months. In the old days, it was like, oh, well, I've trained for this, I'm in the wrong career. Maybe next life I'll get it right. But you guys have much more opportunity to change. Pauline asks, can you imagine a time when people don't physically go to school, it's all online? / playing Fortnite.
So as you'd have seen in the video that started today, the UNE is doing university education where you don't need to necessarily go to university for 70 years. So absolutely yes. Can I ask a question? Can I get a show of hands? How many of you have learnt something online this week? Like everybody. Can I ask another question? How many of you have related to another human being, shared a joke, maybe flirted with someone online in the last week? Okay?
How about the last 10 minutes?
I'll be a bit political here. The New South Wales Education Minister, Rob Stokes, has said that he's a bit dubious about students who studied online without actually going to university because online is not relational. And I'm thinking, is that actually right? I think we've got these magnificent technologies that now allow people to connect with each other. And yeah, it's great if you can sit in a coffee shop and chew the fat. But if you can't, if you're 400 kilometres away from the nearest coffee shop, you can still do that now, and you can still learn in that conversation. Because ultimately, education is about connecting people. It's about relating, whether that's online or face-to-face.
Yeah. Hugh asks, I want to go to uni, but I can't decide what to study. What fields do you think are the ones that might be the wisest ones to study, given how much change is going to happen?
So first of all, that's good. Just the fact that you want to go to university and study anything, go do that. And study whatever you're interested in. And it might not end up being the thing that you get into. You can go into something else. Or how many adults are working in jobs today that aren't in the career field that they studied? It's about creating a base of knowledge that you can use for whatever that you do. So when we talked about the skills earlier, problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, that's across all industries. That's across all studies. So what are you passionate about? And if you don't know now, that's okay. You're going to constantly learn. Most of us, I mean, I was a double major because I couldn't decide one or the other. I have lots of friends who are double majors. I have lots of friends who went to study one thing and then studied something else and then studied something else. So that's okay. It's the idea that you understand that you want to constantly learn and that you need to learn, that's the most important thing. So go do that first.
Doing the same job for 60 years is pretty boring. You might as well do 6 different ones for 10 years each. Do you have anything to add, Jonathan, or should we?
Yeah, just one thing. I mean, there's this wonderful tradition at universities of the liberal arts education. It goes back centuries. And, you know, it's been a little bit under threat. But what I think is it's going to come back with a vengeance. as the problems that we need to solve in the future get more and more wicked, they are more and more about judgment and communication and collaboration and telling fake news from real news. These are the things that a liberal arts education that teaches you how to think are all about and always have been about. So, yeah, things are changing rapidly, but some of the core qualities about university education haven't changed at all.
From each of you, what are one or two, this is from Sally, developments in the wonderful world of technology that you have seen recently that you're most excited about?
I can go first if you want. So for me, and it's a little bit of a problem because I actually have a tough time with it, is virtual reality. I think virtual reality has huge potential in education. The ability to put on a pair of glasses and transform yourself into some other place and to visit some place is just amazing to me. There was an organization called Nomads, and how they introduced me to the whole world of virtual reality, or virtual reality as a whole, was, they showed me a picture of what was happening in Syria, and you can react to it. Then they showed me a video of what's happening in Syria, and you can react to it. And then they made me put on virtual reality glasses to walk around Syria to see what was happening. Completely different experience. And we're at the very, 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 very beginning of virtual reality and what it's going to look like. How many of you read Ready Player One? Yeah, awesome. My 7-year-old made me read Ready Player One. So I read it. Also, because I was born in the 80s, a lot of that made sense. Like, I grew up playing Pac-Man and Donkey Kong, right? So I read that book, and at the end of it, I'm like, yep, that's exactly what's going to happen. So that's where virtual reality, I think, can go in the future.
Yeah, one from you, Jonathan?
Well, it's actually not a particular technology, but it's an attribute of technology. And that's what we're seeing is technology's ability to just disappear into the background. You don't even know it's there. It's a bit like your story about your 4-year-old and Google. And I've got a 4-year-old who talks to Google, and she doesn't think it's a technology. She just thinks it's Google. And Lord help us if they start talking to each other via Google. Likewise, I think 5 years' time, you'll be studying on a website somewhere, and you'll be getting feedback on some complicated maths problem or a piece of legal interpretation. You won't know if that's a person or if it's an artificial intelligence. And so for me, the most exciting and in some ways a little troubling thing that's impacting me about technology is this propensity for it to disappear into the background.
From Clancy, do you have anything negative to say about technology? Oh, I do. Leaf blowers. So negative to say about. Remember, technology isn't just computer stuff. Technology is that table. Technology is everything humans have built.
Yeah, but I get the question, which is like, look, here's the thing about the word technology that we have to be careful on, is that you have to understand moderation. You'll have adults say to you, like, put down the phone, or you'll see articles like, these kids today, they don't know how to socialize, and you don't pay attention to that. But understand moderation. Understand that there's time to be outside and there's times to play games. And understand there's times to be on your phone and there's time for eye contact. Understand the most fundamental thing, which is you can't do two things at the same time. It's impossible. You have not evolved that fast, right? So you cannot be on your phone and watch sports on TV at the same time. You just can't do it. So pick one and do that well. So moderation is important through all of this.
For me, I'll stick with the artificial intelligence issue. It raises some really important questions. I mean, I'd love to see a future in which a judge in a trial in the future has got access to the very best artificial intelligence generated information about a case or about the legal precedent and so on and so forth. But I'd hate to see a future in which the decision about someone's future was made by an artificial intelligence. And I think that's where this critical difference comes about in terms of the exercise of human judgment, which is much more than the application of information. In Australia, we've had a big issue about that recently with some social security debts being called in on the basis of an artificially intelligent letter being sent out without any human intervention. It's created all sorts of difficulties. So I think we have to be very careful about how we let technology make judgments.
Well, interestingly, your graph showed lawyers right up here, hard to disrupt, but judges kind of in the middle, a lot easier to disrupt. So you might have a couple of human lawyers addressing that little robot in the future. This is from Kathy. What impresses you the most when you are considering hiring someone? Kathy wants a job.
Oh, I like Kathy. So So again, I think that I look for someone who's smarter than me and someone who's confident in what they know, but also able and willing to work with others. Absolutely the most critical job, and we talked about this earlier, collaboration, the ability to work well with others, the ability to find talent, the ability to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you that you can learn from, I think is some of the most important skills you could have.
Yeah, we were finding it hard to disagree earlier, and I agree. I don't care if you can already do the job. In fact, if you can already do the job, I'm slightly worried. Can you learn? And then can you learn and can you teach me something that I didn't know? And then can you work with others effectively so we all can be better than the sum of our parts? When you're hiring someone, you're hiring into a team, and teams are always, if they're structured well, are always performing better than the sum of the individuals. And so can you contribute to that team?
Do you need to have this from Aaron? Do you need to have high grades in maths to have the ability to problem solve at a high level? No, the damn no. Definitely not, I would say, but what do you guys think?
Oh, yeah, no, look, I think it's all about learning how things work, right? So, you know, with my 4-year-old, for the last couple of years, I've been teaching her computational thinking, and she doesn't know it, right? Which is this idea that understanding how things work. And so, I'll walk into the room when we're getting dressed to go to the mall with my t-shirt on top of my head, and I'll say to her, okay, I'm ready to go. And she's like, that's not where your shirt goes. I'm like, where's my shirt go? She goes, it goes on your arm. And so I take the shirt off and I put it on my arm, and it keeps falling off. And she goes, no, it goes on your arm, right? And so I do it, I put it all on one arm. So, I'm walking her through the idea of computational thinking. So if you think about how to think, that's the most important, to your point, I think, which is right on, which is the ability to learn. To understand that you don't know something, recognize that you don't know it, and then figure out how to learn it so that you can get better at whatever it is that you're doing.
I agree. Absolutely not. It's all about diversity of ways of thinking. One of the best things about a university, you've got all these different people, all of whom think in different ways, and they put their collective intelligence to solving problems. That's what university means. It actually literally means one direction, but that's a bit unfortunate. How quickly things age. So the best part about my job is going around and seeing the mathematicians and scientists, and I try and persuade them, to do something innovative, and they say, show me the numbers. Where's the evidence? How much difference, what percentage point difference would this change make? I go and see the historians and they say, what's your argument? Give me the precedent. Talk me through this, and how colourful can your rhetoric be? So what really works is those multiple perspectives and many others besides being applied to the same problem. So no, maths is not essential. There are all sorts of ways of solving problems.
Yeah, but maths is that kind of, I think you're referencing that logical way of thinking, and I think there's two ways of thinking. You need them both to solve a problem. One's that kind of high-level conceptual, creative thinking where you put lots of different things together, then have an idea. But then you do need the logical step-by-step way of working out how to get that idea swirling around your head into a thing.
And it's also more about having an appreciation for math. I am terrible at math. Like, if you give me two numbers to add up, I need 15 minutes to add them up. I'm talking about like 13 plus 73, like
86.
That's going to take me a while, right? So I'm terrible at math, but I appreciate it, right? It's this idea, this understanding that math is all around us, right? And not to get all religious on you, but it's like the Matrix, right? Everything is zeros and ones. Everything on the stage was built by math. Everything in here has been built by math. And so understanding and appreciating how math works, and then finding people who are better at math than I am to help me answer some of the questions around math. You don't have to know math, you have to appreciate it.
You know how some people say poets built the world? Our world was created by poets. It wasn't. It was created by engineers. Everything in this room is created by engineers, and they're pretty good at maths. Is artificial intelligence bad? That's from Jamie. Just a one-word answer. No, a nuanced answer is good.
No, artificial intelligence doesn't have, currently, ethics. The ethics come from the humans who steer it, program it, interact with it, empower it, or control it. So this is what I was getting at earlier. The ethical, the moral will come from us, and we need to understand that. There's a fascinating game, well, it's not really a game, but it's posed as a game on the internet around, how will you program a driverless car when you've got a whole bunch of people walking in front of you, they all leap out. Do you program it to run over the old person or to crash and kill a passenger? Someone's got to tell an artificial intelligent car how to respond in those situations, and there are ethics around that. Some of those decisions will be bad, but if artificial intelligence ends up bad, it's our fault.
How far, related question, are we from artificial intelligence having consciousness?
Define consciousness.
Define consciousness. I don't know. I have no idea.
Here's my view on that, is I don't think we necessarily have to worry about that. I think we're always going to have human skills and we're going to have robotics. It's not a question of one versus the other. And oftentimes in the news media, there always has to be a villain and there always has to be a hero, right? That's how media works. But in reality, it's a complementary relationship. It's humans working with machines, and that's been true since the beginning of time. The first time an ox went down the field on a farm, that farmer was using technology. That ox was the technology. So it's a complementary relationship that we have to look at.
The very brilliant mathematician and computer scientist Alan Turing, and some of you may have seen the film The Imitation Game, which is a portrayal of his life. He defined it differently. He said, essentially, an artificial intelligence will have consciousness when it is able to fool us it has. And when I originally heard that definition, I thought, what's real consciousness? And the more I live with it, the more I think that he's probably right. And I think we're at that point. Certainly, I think my 4-year-old thinks that Google is conscious.
This is from Lily. What is your personal opinion on the development of technologies in the agriculture industry and how it will affect people entering it?
That's your field.
Well, it's certainly the field of the University of New England. We're world leaders in the field of agriculture. It's not my field specific, so I've got to be careful what I say. What I do know is that not just the practice of agriculture, it's not just about the science of agriculture that's being transformed by technology. It's the whole the way in which agriculture impacts on society or in business or in law are also going to be impacted by technology. So I'd actually rather think about the question as how is technology going to impact on rural communities in their totality and how they interact as systems and ecosystems. And I think the effect is going to be absolutely profound, but the technological impact might not come through the development of a widget that enables us to distribute fertilizer better, but through the ability to manage rural businesses more effectively through collaboration technologies.
We've all heard this from Kristen, that we need to be engaged in lifelong learning. How do you think university education will or should change in order to make lifelong learning affordable for average people?
Well, I'll let you address the affordability part of it. For me, I want to start with this idea that what you're doing here today isn't thinking about what your next stage of education should be. I hope you look at it in terms of what partnership you're building for the rest of your life. Because I look at learning and I talk to universities around the world all the time about this idea of not thinking about students as someone who comes in, spends 4 years, and then leaves, but instead creating a partnership forever so that anything that you need to learn for the rest of your life should be coming through that website or coming through that university, and that you're constantly going back and learning new things. And it's that lifelong partnership that you have with a higher education institution that really puts you on the path to success, and that's what I hope that we create with universities.
Completely agree again. And so to address that affordability question, something interesting has happened with software. Let's just go to software for a second. We used to spend a large amount of money and buy a software package, and that was it. Microsoft Word or something. You'd buy the CD and you'd install it on your computer. It's different now. It's a subscription model. Every year you pay a little bit of money and you have constant access to the most up-to-date version of Microsoft Word. Okay, so translate that into education. What about you don't pay a big upfront fee to complete your 3 years of education and then you're on your own? What about you, or even better, our government and you, make a contribution to a lifelong subscription to the learning that you need when you need it in the size that you need? So, look, I'll be unashamed. I'd like to invite each and every one of you to come to the University of New England, but I won't invite any of you to ever leave. I want you to be able to be part of a relationship And I think if that's the case, that lifelong learning relationship comes about, we really need to think about how the cost is borne by society.
And here's the benefit of that kind of model, right? So I am just getting back into photography, so I just signed up for my Lightroom CC subscription. Anyone use Lightroom? Right? Yeah, so it's a subscription service. And what's cool is if a Lightroom sold me a software package, I bought the software package for, let's say $300 US. And they're like, haha, you bought it, too late. If you don't like it, too bad, right? But because I'm a subscriber, because I'm in for as long as they're good, they have to keep making that product better. They have to keep they have to keep making sure I'm locked in and keep advancing and keep giving me. I've had so much professional development around that too. Like, here are all the lessons that you need to learn. Here's where you start. It's Lightroom that's teaching me how to use their tool because I'm subscribed. I haven't bought something and then they can just move on to the next customer. I'm engaged with them forever, and I think that model can work really well in higher education.
This is from Hamish, I think talking about schools, not universities. How come technology has changed and advanced so much, but classrooms are still the same, except for the technology in them? Even the technology is the same as it was back in the day, and why do they teach us just to do a test to get a mark?
Here.
So can I have a crack at that while you guys think it's something clever to say? I think you guys are at a time of transition, and if we could, right, we'd transition like that. But there are thousands of schools in New South Wales, and often you come up against what's called an infrastructure block. That is, people want to change, but all the classrooms they've got built, they want to change to more bigger collaborative working spaces, but they're full of these classrooms designed for 30 students and one teacher. Or they want everyone to get online and do everything online, but if they have more than 30 people online at the same time, the Wi-Fi crashes. So there needs to be a big investment in changing the physical spaces, changing the IT stuff, and because there's thousands of schools in New South Wales alone, that unfortunately takes time. But I think most schools, some quicker than others, are getting it.
I would also push back that on you guys and say, okay, go become teachers, then administrators, and go change the system, right? Because that's the problem I'm trying to solve, and that's what I'm working on, and it's doable. The school that I mentioned, the Phoenix Coding Academy, we don't have tests at that school. We don't have grades at that school. We don't have homework at that school because we recognize that homework, with the research, shows us that it doesn't do anything. And so we're trying a different model, and it's working really well so far. And there's lots of schools like that around the world. So to your point, we're at the beginning of this. But it's going to take a whole army of people to say, no, that didn't work for me. I want to do it differently. Let me go learn how it should be, and then go implement that in schools around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. There was an educator called John Dewey who 100 years ago said, hey, this classroom thing, you're not going to learn effectively there. But it was a really good question. Why do we still learn in our classroom as a technology, and that's technology that hasn't changed? And I'll tell you why I think, and it actually goes to what James said at the beginning of your speech. Education, the education we get shapes who we are. It really shapes our identities. It's core to our being. And we are very reluctant to let go of how we learnt. So, it's really easy for educational tradition to just cascade down the generations, because that's how I learned in a classroom. And are you saying that I didn't have a really excellent education? Because now I'm a teacher. So I think we need to break the circuit somehow and say, yeah, look, that was fine, but it's time to grasp the nettle and actually lay aside some of our educational practices that have been traditional, how we learnt, in favour of what evidence says works.
Last question. What do you think a uni campus will look like in 10 or 20 years' time? I guess that's for you, Jonathan, first.
Look, in some ways, I think it will look radically different, and it will look however you want it to look through your virtual reality headset when you're sitting in Dubbo and actually studying at UNE. I think it will look like that. But in other ways, I think it'll look the same as they've always looked. Because what a uni campus is a place where people get together. It's the lecture theatres, let's blow up all the lecture theatres. I don't think we'll have any lecture theatres in 30 years if I've got anything to do with it. But that's not what the heart of a university is. The heart of a university is a place where people collaborate, people learn together, they talk. It's about the ability to share and have all those conflicting viewpoints that different disciplines bring. And there are certain sorts of locations and structures and facilities that people have needed since the year dot to do that, and its ability to talk and drink and have coffee and argue. And that won't change ever.
Fantastic. Please thank Jonathan and Jamie, ladies and gentlemen.